you're born, right?
Nope.
And then, so she's going to talk about bugs in the garden, and I'll let her take it away. So please
Awesome.
welcome Deb.
Is this on the mic? Can you hear it? Oh, perfect. All right. So Deborah North with the Pima County Cooperative Extension Service. I'm a master gardener, have been for a while. I'm not really a master. I'm still a student, as always. So master gardeners, 200 or so university trained volunteers. We're here to extend the science of the university into the public or share it with the public through a variety of outreach programs. So let me just quickly go through some of them. This is how you can contact us or find out what we're up to, what we're doing, the QR code or the URL. They worked as of this morning, but they are working on our website, so no guarantees. We serve 8 public libraries in the county between September and May. So, and they span from Vail to Marana. So we're kind of throughout town. Demonstration gardens at how many of you have been to Campbell? What is it, 15 demonstration gardens I think we have now, and they're all themed, if you will. They are demonstration gardens. It's not botanical gardens. We have failures as well as success. One, what? Demonstration gardens, Campbell, just north of Roger Road on the east side of Campbell. It's a county cooperative extension office, yeah. And the themes are cactus and succulents, habitat, basin edibles, raised bed edibles. So each of the gardens is really meant to help demonstrate a methodology of gardening here in the Sonoran Desert. We have a plant clinic where you can send in your plant problems online. We are also in person again, Mondays and Thursdays from 10 to 2. Bring in pictures, bring in samples. It's really helpful if you send us pictures. Descriptions really don't usually help a lot. So use us for that. Newsletters, we're on some socials. Our home garden tour is April 5th. We're self-funded. We have 3 major fundraisers, 1 home garden tour in April, and then plant sale in April and another plant sale in October. This home garden tour in April it's going to be different than what we've ever done. It's all the houses are up in the north part of, actually they're in Catalina. So basically a different biome. So that'll be interesting. I think there may be 1 house in Oro Valley. I'm not entirely sure about that, but really different and unique for Tucsonans to look at. Our plant sale is Saturday, April 19th. And Keith was saying, I think you all are having a table at our April 5th home garden tour, probably at the extension, I'm thinking. So that will also be open. And we have campus tours of the University of Arizona Arboretum. The entire campus is an arboretum. And those are Saturdays, Sundays by reservation. They are themed tours. It's the only time you're going to hear master gardeners talking about medicinal plants. One of the few times you'll hear them talking about native edibles. We're pretty restricted on those topics, but there's a tour around Old Main and how they've changed that landscaping and so on. So check that out. The objectives for me tonight, I just want to really cultivate your curiosity about the insects that are in your garden. What are they doing? Why do they do what they do? How do they do it? And let's differentiate between necessary control and leaving the balance. I've been an organic gardener since, the early 90s. My conversion, if you will, was discovering how bad glyphosate was for my physiology. Every time I used it, I got sick. Took me a while to realize that it was that. And that was the end of me and chemicals. I've not done them since then. So, and just understanding some key factors in insect management, that's integrated pest management, that'll be kind of the wrap up here. And I'm gonna really try hard to keep it to an hour or so. I do wanna remind you that insects are the most successful life form on the planet. Probably moles and fungi, there are more of them, but they're not as diverse. And if we disappear, all the humans disappear from the planet's gonna go on. If insects disappear, the planet will collapse. Literally will not be able to go on. They are the most successful life form on the planet. And this is a pie chart of the animal kingdom because we share the same kingdom with insects and all of these other things. Protozoans and nematodes are all animals. But do you see humans on that chart? No. So here's insects, this entire swath. Over 1 million species of insects have been identified. Scientists think that there are at least 1 million others that haven't been or have been lost over time. Humans, we are here. We have been othered. As an entire species, we are other. We are just other. So interesting to me, fascinating. Anyway, so they are animal kingdom. They're the phylum of Arthropoda. All that means, Arthropoda, sorry, is joint and foot, right? They have joints and feet, jointed feet. So jointed joints. And class is Insecta. These are 5 of the classes. These are probably the most common. There's beetles here, bees and wasps, grasshoppers, flies, that sort of kind of gnarly bit, Lepidoptera being the butterflies, and moths. And there are 25 entire classes, I think. So pop quiz. The majority of insects harmful to humans, true or false? Absolutely false. Most are completely benign to us. There are many more beneficial insects than there are harmful. The harmful insects get all the attention, right? It's yes, human nature, we pay attention to negative news. So different things. So I'll go through kind of a list of where we really see harm here coming up. So world without insects, without bees, goes without saying. The grocery store would have a lot of empty shelves in the fruits and vegetables area for sure. Without ants, we would not have the spread of flowering plants that we have. They move the seeds, they help germinate the seeds, they help plow the soil, if you will, and help enliven and introduce oxygen into the soil. And they can help pollinate. They're accidental in that, but they can help with that. Without beetles, and I will tell you, Coleoptera, I think, is my very favorite class of insects. So without beetles, and I actually learned this when I was a freshman in college, we would be walking around in dung over our heads, right? So when you next time really get annoyed by a beetle or a grub, just think about what life would be like without it. So pop quiz, deadliest animal to humans on the planet? Mosquitoes. Yep, they are the deadliest animal to humans far by the numbers. So there you go. I just throw these in for cocktail party things that you can just, if somebody's really annoying you at a cocktail party, you say, "What's the deadliest animal on the planet to humans?" And they're going to walk away, and they're going to leave you alone after that. So insects, most diverse group of animals on the planet, true or false? True. Most diverse and the most of them. So daily importance. This is where we get to positives and negatives. So obviously pollination. I love that picture of the bee just because it's so full of pollen. So pollination, our food supply, the numbers are overwhelming. 96% of flowering plants need pollinators to reproduce. There's a small 4% that don't. They are self-pollinating or it can move around on its own. The economics are huge. This is old data. The EPA should be coming out with new data in maybe in a year. And I have a feeling this is going to have more than doubled. So we're looking at billions of dollars from the work that insects are doing. And just a really brief pitch for native bees. Honeybees are imported. They're not native to North America. They were brought in by European settlers who thought they could help them with their deciduous fruit crop. And they become, kind of part of the scenery, if you will. But native bees, here in southeastern Arizona, we have 400 species of native bees, none of which will sting or bite you or envenomate you. Most of them live in the ground or in among rocks. And they kind of are low to the ground and they kind of move slowly and look a little bit different, but they are really important pollinators. And here's the thing. You couldn't do a Big Mac meal without them, because all of these foods that come in one of the meals require some form of pollination to exist. Everyday things. Decomposition, again, one of my favorite aspects of insects. Life would be untenable without these recyclers and the, the insects that help decomposition. Go after dead animals. They go after our leavings, right? So, you know, our own personal poop, frass, or the scat of an animal, frass of an insect. They help break down dead, dying plant material. They actually, plants that are in bad shape, are in ill health, send out chemical signals to the pest insects that can take them out of the gene pool. So that we have, you know, the point of that is that they can succeed with good seeds and not propagate from seeds that are, say, weaker. They move nutrients, they help the soil, they help till the soil, clean the environment. Forensic scientists rely on specific beetles and flies to identify times of death and all of that. I don't really, you know, that one I don't talk too much about. And then products that we think of, we use and we don't really think about, right? Silk, honey, shellac still comes from a scale insect. Red dye from our beautiful cochineal scale. And I don't know if you're aware, but the dye from the cochineal scale helped us win the Revolutionary War. Because in their wisdom, so cochineal scale at one time was one of the major export products of Spain, right? And there are still farms in South America that are prickly pear that are particularly for the harvest of cochineal scale for use in dyes. But back in the day, I don't know who it was in the UK, decided that all of the officers' coats needed to be a very bright red. And so they used the cochineal scale. So the lesser guys, you know, the non-coms and the walking soldiers, their jackets were dyed with madder, which is a plant material that's sort of a brown to red, but it's not a bright red. So they had all the officers in this really brilliant magenta red out in front, making them perfect targets for the American rebels. So just FYI. So products we use, for me, really important, this change in the vaccines, the process baculovirus expression. I was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré in 1999, was not able to take vaccines grown in chicken and eggs. Because of that, it would prove deadly. So this new process was approved in 2013 and faster growing than in chicken eggs. One of the reasons they got the COVID virus, the COVID vaccines out so fast, many fewer allergic reactions. And people like myself who are immunocompromised can't do the chicken ones, we could do that. And there are people around the world eating the insects that we keep trying to kill, right? It's mind blowing to me, right? Mexico, ants, locusts, worms, they found another use. They're high protein. The fat they contain is the good fat. Brazil, fried ants, probably don't want to fry them here. This I find particularly fascinating in Ghana. Their number one source of protein is a large termite, you know, the kind of termites that build big mounds. 60% of the dietary protein in that country comes from termites. Thailand, crickets, grasshoppers, again, these insects that we try to kill, they have found a use for. China, very developed nation, but this is still a delicacy. I'm not sure I would eat the larva. I kind of like these guys, so I'd rather save them. But and then even in what we consider first world countries, like the Netherlands, they are actually starting to introduce ground insects, finding a way to use those in products they have. Now we get to the downside, the detrimental stuff, right? They can be detrimental. Typically, they are problematic because they vector diseases in, or they can damage goods, food, other plants. The big problem we have are invasives, because invasives have generally no native control. And so that's a problem. So does anybody know or recognize, you do probably, Deb, what this is? And if you don't recognize the insect, you might recognize the effluvia. And this is an invasive that is of great concern in the southern part of the United States. It's been very expensive. Asian citrus psyllid. So if you see this kind of effluvia on your plants, these are basically egg casings, and but this is the psyllid. And the psyllid is not the problem, right? It can carry a disease. It's a sapsucker. We're going to go through hemiptera in a minute. What the problem is, it carries and vectors into citrus this disease called Huanglongbing. Here they call it citrus greening. And what this disease does is it disallows the fruit from being able to mature. And it's become a very expensive problem. In Florida, exceeding 4.6 billion in cost to that state. It's decimated the orchards between the hurricanes and Huanglongbing. And in Florida, it is so grave, you cannot remove the trees. If they find that you have a tree infected with this disease, they actually come and they burn it on site. And they're starting to do that in California as well. Texas and, what's that? Citrus only. So it's a food. This is a major food product, right, in this country. Where we never really had very much competition for the production. And now we can't produce it. So Texas and California, more than $1 billion. Arizona has not reported how much it's cost us. Every county in Arizona that grows citrus is quarantined. You can't carry plants, leaves, or the fruit across. So like if you have an orange tree here and you want to take fruit up to your friend in Saddlebrook, which is Pinal County, you really should not be doing that, right? We're supposed to stay within the county. And so we know we have the psyllid. Here in this county, they have not yet had the disease report. So if you see this in citrus, you should really call the Cooperative Extension or Arizona's Department of Ag and see what they want, if they want you to bring samples in. They sometimes will come out and put traps in your trees. It depends on what their budgetary situation is, quite honestly. So the current overall problem has cost more than $10 billion. We do know this is in California. We do know the disease is in Texas. So, and interestingly enough, it was anticipated that it would come from the east, because it landed in Florida in a cargo ship and has been moving west ever since. But the first leaves with the psyllid came in through Nogales, which was and it was just leaves. There were no fruit in the bag. There was not a tree. It was random. A lot of research going on in use at the University of California, Riverside. They think they have a modification of a bacillus that I'll talk about in a little bit on regard to another insect that may take out the insect itself. No natural predator. So we had a talk we have we're lucky, we have the best citrus guy probably in the country out of Yuma County. And he gave us, were you at the talk with Glenn a few months ago? And for the first time, he really talked about how this has made a tremendous decline in the quality of fruit, the quality of the flavor of the fruit, and that our frozen or fresh orange juice just doesn't have the same gusto and taste that it used to. So that's what a mature fruit with citrus greening will look like. It just will not mature and sugar up and have flavor. So anyway, that's the thing on the downside of them. Insects, 3 body segments. This is how you identify them. They have a head, a thorax, this middle part, that's their engine. All of their legs come out of the thorax. And I'm going to teach you that so that when you look at an artist's representation of an insect and you start seeing them coming out of the backside, you can say, you didn't study your insects properly. The legs only come out of the thorax. And then the abdomen. And really, that's where they breathe, which is kind of interesting. They don't breathe through their mouths. So that's the abdomen. They have 3 pairs of legs, so 6 legs. Remember, it was hexapoda, right? 6 legs, 1 pair of antennae. So what's not insect? And this I think is really important to understand as organic gardeners, because there are some of these that we think might be an insect, but some of the controls we use organically are going to have absolutely no effect on them because they don't have the same physiology, right? So let's talk about arachnids. Arachnids are different. Scorpions are in here, ticks are in here, spider mites are in here, right? Little mites, right? So 8 legs, 2 body parts, some of which, like I always point out, this is a good guy. It can look a little scary, but you want to, the only, well, there are 2 arachnids to be a little concerned about. Scorpions, yeah, you know, especially if you're a little one or a really old one. And I'm fighting that as hard as I can be. So yeah, get that. Black widows are really the only of the spiders that we need to be concerned about here. We don't have brown recluses. You know what the most venomous spider is, though, in Arizona? This is really interesting to me, is daddy longlegs. But we are immune to their venom. We are absolutely, we have co-evolved to live in the same places. So it's, what's that? Even if they could, their venom wouldn't bother us. Not that I want you to go squeeze one and inject it, but so please don't do that because you might be allergic. I don't know. Okay, so not arachnids, they're not insects. These millipedes, millipedes are differentiated from centipedes because millipedes have multiple legs coming out of each of those articulated body segments. So they're not, and you cannot control millipedes and centipedes with the same stuff you use. I mean, unless you go scorched earth, chemical, systemic. And this is not that crowd, right? You guys are my people. I can lean hard into the organics. I don't have to cushion it. So, and this one, right? Pill bugs, they are not insects, right? What's that? Yeah, the roly-polies. Any idea what they are? Because I love this part of it. Their closest relation is lobsters. They are land crustaceans. Isn't that wonderful? But if you think about the physiology, the anatomy of that, spraying neem oil, not going to do anything. You know, sharp shot of water, you're going to really annoy them. They're going to roll up and roll away, right? If you're using soapy water, they're just going to take a bath, right? So things to think about. And I love that their little name, their armadillidium vulgare, just means common little armadillo. So I love Latin names because they tell you a story. What's that? You know, they don't really need to control because they really, if you have a nice healthy garden with healthy plants, they're not going to kill the plants. If you overdone organic material that has not decayed enough, they might become a little bit problematic. You know, if the bits are too big for them. But mostly they're just a detrivore, which is taking up the organic material. No, no. They get a bad rap, but they're really pretty benign. So, and I'm all about less. So if you're a heavy sprayer of anything, you're going to be unhappy tonight. Now, water fleas fall into this, right? So they are in this little subphylum crustacea. And just in case you're interested, take a snapshot and go to 15 fascinating facts about. I think somebody should study it. Okay, purple insects have 2 pair of antennae. False, that is correct. They have 1 pair of antennae. All insects, 6 legs, 3 body parts. True. Good. Spiders are classified as insects. Ooh. See, you're so smart. Any questions? I just threw this in because I love this photograph. Hmm? Yep. Across the board. They don't hive. Oh,
I was asking when she talked about the native bees, I asked if they were all solitary bees.
yep. And they are. They're not social bees. They don't have the same social order. Yeah, they're. So I have been nipped by one when I was in digging with bare hands, and I just happened to get to wherever it was living. But it, you know, I was the problem. It was not them. So, and it did hurt a little. So I want to talk about mouth parts, which for us as gardeners, trying to identify damage is really it's a lifelong journey. I'll just say that. So they do not have, insects do not have brains as like ours. They have like a cluster of neurons going on, but mostly their heads are about feeding and the sensory. You know, they have these huge compound eyes that you can see here, and so basically, you know, think about how your lens works, and they have thousands of them, right? So what they see is this kind of blurry, multifaceted thing, and they're looking for motion and light, right? They're looking for predators, they're looking for prey. It's a simple life. So feeding and sensory only. Antenna, eyes, mouth parts, that's where they've got. Like I said, they don't breathe through their mouth. They breathe through the sides of their bodies using these sphericals, kind of a really interesting way of exchanging the gases. But we don't have time to go into that in detail, sorry. So 4 types of mouth parts, which is kind of mind-blowing for such a massive family of things. I mean, 4 different kinds of mouth parts. And when you're out in the garden, sometimes it feels like they have a million different mouth parts because the damage they could do. But only 4. So we have chewing, piercing, and sucking. We're going to spend a little more time on those than anything else. Siphoning. Siphoning mouth parts are beneficials. That is Lepidoptera, so it's adult butterflies and moths. Fabulous adaptation. What's interesting is that and we're going to talk about this, their larval stage, completely different mouth parts that can be perceived as a pest. Sponging, we're not really going to talk about that. That's houseflies, blowflies, fruit flies, but we're not going to talk about them tonight because they're okay. They're just not that interesting. So let's go to chewing mouth parts. When we talk about chewers, we got ants, beetles, lady beetles, and we're talking about, for sure, the adult stages, crickets, grasshoppers, green lacewing, praying mantis. The interesting thing about this list to me is you see some of the finest of our beneficials in here, but you also see some of our biggest enemies, right? I mean, I understand that grasshoppers have a place on the planet. They just don't really have a great place in my garden. It's one of the few insects I do try to hand pick them. I feel like it's a little aerobic exercise I might get that I wouldn't otherwise. You know, if you could see me in the garden, it's either a laugh or a cry situation. It's not pretty. It's getting worse. So the types of damage that you get from these chewing mouth parts. And I'm going to show you some pictures that you know Hollywood stole the idea for some great characters. These skeletonizing, when we talk about skeletonizing, this is a kind of damage we're looking at, where they've actually taken out that sweet flesh in between the veins, right? And it could go all the way through where you can see through, or they can leave a kind of a thin veil of cells. Notching, this is what we were talking about when we see notching. Can be, you know, an annoying pest, or it can also be the leafcutter bee on your bougainvillea, right? Those beautiful, perfect circles out of the edges of your leaves. No recommendation for any kind of treatment for those because they're so beneficial, so beneficial. And they're just taking out those little circles to make their little cells for their eggs and their babies. Who doesn't love a mother that does that? Shot hole feeding. Now this is one of the bad boys, right? This is typically, and you can't really see it too well, but they're little flea beetles. This is when you see shot holing that looks like this, where you have almost perfectly round circles, immediately go to flea beetles because there is really nothing else that does this kind of a confirmation of damage. This poor leaf though, I would say this plant is in trouble. Remember I mentioned plants that are in trouble? They send out a chemical signal and say, come and take me out of the gene pool. Right, there's caterpillar damage here. There might be some grasshopper damage here, and they've got flea beetle. At this point, you know, I don't even know if it's good enough for compost. Leaf rolling and folding, you're going to see this also occurring in piercing and sucking, but this is in particular, this is from psyllids. They can do this. Some caterpillars can create this kind of damage because caterpillars, right, the larval stage of the Lepidoptera can do this as well. Leaf mining, this is actually one of my favorite adaptations. When we're talking about leaf mining, it is not a specific insect, right? It is the larval stage, and I don't think you can see any larvae in this photograph. Sometimes you're really lucky and you can see them in there. And this is an adaptation where they're actually that larval stage, the females lay the egg, the larva is in between the layers of the leaf, and they're just moving through that leaf, taking out all the sugars as they get ready to pupate. Again, this is one of those where we never recommend any kind of control. Hard to control unless you're using a systemic. There's only one organic that can be used systemically. It's very expensive. And typically you're going to see this stuff where you have food as well. So all that goes. So it's a kind of you live and you learn with it. I think it's fun that if you see the active larva in there, cut the leaf out and take it in and put it in a mason jar and grow it out and see what it becomes. Because it could be a sawfly, it could be a little beetle. Am I too much for you? Sorry. I do this in my kitchen too. I don't invite people over to eat. So it could be a beetle, could be a moth. They're very tiny moths that have it's a brilliant adaptation for survival. I mean, gotta admire that, right? So remember I mentioned some pictures of the mandibles, the mouth parts. Look at this mandible. That is a grasshopper mandible. And I just want you to note this little, does that not look like the Mandalorian? Right? So it's just somebody that was traumatized in a biology class and they decided to make the Mandalorian. So, and then these, guess what? Oh, so this is grasshopper. And this is from a ground beetle. One of the really fascinating things when you really look at insects, when you look at their legs, you look at their body, their head, their mouth parts, you can start to dissect that. You don't have to cut them apart, just visually. And you can figure out what those insects are doing to survive, right? When you look at ground beetles, they tend to have really they're like the no neck people. You know, they have just a really thick head, no neck, and then these really short claws and digging things. So anyway, so these are shredders. These are cleaner cuts. And that helps you get to how to identify what is doing what in my garden, right? So when we're looking at a grasshopper, and he's kind of adorable here, but that's just a facade. They're hard to control. There's one organic that you can use. Well, there are two organics now. Now we have two. One is Nosema locusti, which is a protozoa you have to put out. It takes 3 generations to kill them with this, but some ranchers, and it's organic. It only affects mole crickets, Mormon crickets, and grasshopper. Nothing else on the planet. Birds, little vermin can eat these guys when they're full of the Nosema. They will not die, right? So it's great stuff. The other is a fungus called Bovaria bassiana. But those are the only 2 organic controls for this guy. But look at this. It has, and if you could see this a little more clearly, you can see actually there are what look like hairs on that little cut there. And this, much smoother. That's going to be beetle, probably. Could also be a caterpillar. You're going to have to get a little closer and look at that. So consider the green lacewing, right? Remember, this list had some of the bad guys and some of the really good ones. I always like to pitch the green lacewing or brown lacewing, but I like the green because you can really see them. One of the best predators you'll ever have in the garden for soft body pests. If you have problems with aphids and spider mites and thrips, they're the go-to. So their larvae, very strong chewing mouth. Their larvae are about 1/4 of an inch at most. If they land on you and they take a little nip out of you, you will feel it. It won't hurt you, but you will feel it. Pretty amazing. Soft body pests, they are at them all the time. This is what they look like, and you can see that little mouth part there. If you want to see, they're mostly night active, so it's really hard to find them in the garden because they're asleep in the day, kind of like one of my siblings. But anyway, so if you want to find them, take a black light out at night, and if you're really careful, you can see the white light up at night, and that's how you find out about your population. Yes.
Brown or the
It's
white
this.
thing?
That's what he's been eating. He's been in there sucking the sugars out of those aphids. Their nickname as in the larval state is aphid lion. And I've seen them hatch from the egg in a petri dish where there's like white fly in there with them. Nanoseconds for them to hatch and get over there and get that white fly that's alive and moving. Pretty amazing. So as an adult, they still have these strong chewing mouth parts, but they've adapted not to eat our plants, but to actually take in nectar, pollen, and honeydew. They're kind of an accidental pollinator. And they're a lovely thing to have in the garden. They do tend to clean up, like the larva might leave these little shells with some sugars in them around, and the female might come by and take them out. Now, I didn't put a picture in here, but you'll be able to recognize their eggs. They're generally quite white looking, and they're usually laid on the underside of leaves. I've found them on the south-facing side of Palo Verdes, etc. I've had them in the headers of my patio doors. So it's a tiny white egg, but it's attached to what looks like a white human hair, solid white human hair. That's a green lacewing or a brown lacewing, and they're a good guy. So if you see them, don't kill them. I think people do kill them. So sharp mouthparts. What's that? They are. They're so siphoning, again, butterflies and moths, these are beneficials at this age, right? And that's the order Lepidoptera. These are some of their characteristics. I just love this little close-up of this. It's all, you remember how the people said, oh, if you take the powder off their wings, they'll die. That's not true. They're actually very, very tiny scales. And if they died when you were massaging them, it meant you did something else to them. So they undergo complete metamorphosis, which is great, and those siphoning mouth parts. Just a really quick thing, if you want to know if it's a butterfly or a moth, moths, when they're at rest, their wings are always backward like this. And when butterflies are at rest, their wings are. So if you're out in the garden and the wings are up, that's a butterfly. You can also identify them from their antenna, but we don't have time to go through this. Sorry. So complete metamorphosis, right? Multiple modes of action in this family, right? When they are in their larval stage, their mouth parts are chewing mouth parts. So some people think they're pests, and I'm here to convince you otherwise. That's my job today. They can skeletonize, they can cause the notching, that sort of thing. And that's what a caterpillar looks like. And it does have these chewing mouth parts, and they can do some damage, I'll admit. But then as adults, they're siphoning mouth parts, and they are a beneficial pollinator. So we move to this phase. So consider the orange dog. How many of you grow citrus? No? Oh, good, good, good. So, and how many of you have seen the orange dog? Yep. And how many of you have seen the giant swallowtail, right? So another brilliant adaptation. They look like bird poop, and people will call us in the plant clinic or send us, say, what is this bird poop? It's really soft and it has orange things. And yeah, if you taunt them, you'll have antennae, and I do taunt them. I don't kill them, but I do sometimes taunt them. Anyway, they become this beautiful giant swallowtail. So, and that's a proboscis of a butterfly, right? It unfurls, they're very long, very amazing to watch. So typically they lay their eggs, these swallowtails, on citrus leaves. And every year they come into my garden and I welcome them, right? And their eggs are very, very, very tiny. A lot of people shoo them off thinking it's debris or something, but please don't. Anyway, chewing mouth parts, they chew the leaves, and you can see all these little brown things. That's their frass. That's the poop they leave behind. And honestly, insect frass is highly valued as a soil improvement thing. You can, if you're a specific kind of grower that I'm not allowed to talk about, you pay a lot of money for bags of insect frass to improve your soil. Just saying. It's good stuff. So don't worry about it. Just, let it go to the soil. All right, and then as an adult, largest butterfly, siphoning mouth parts, great pollinator. So is it a beneficial or is it a pest, right? If you are a citrus grower, it's on the pesty side. But here's the deal. By the time it's this big, by the time you see the damage, it's ready to pupate and become this beauty, right? So really, you can do things to control them. But if you have a healthy citrus shrub or tree, they're only going to do cosmetic damage. It's like thrips. They're only going to do cosmetic damage to you. So I think that we can love them both. All right, so here's the ladybug. And really the reason I have this in, because you all know about ladybugs, right? We all love them. But I think the eggs, they really look a lot like squash bug eggs. And I raise my hand because I'm pretty sure I'm guilty of before I knew how to recognize ladybugs, which are not quite as amber, and they tend to be a little bit longer, not as squished looking. I'm pretty sure I killed ladybug eggs thinking they were squash. So I bring that up for your consideration, shall we say. Okay, chewing mouth parts, the minute they hatch, they are out there being predators of all those great soft body pests that we love. And sometimes when I've sworn to myself one of these days I'm going to put together a talk that is on yellow and black insects and red and black insects and why you should not be afraid. Because I think we're hardwired to think red and black insects are bad. I don't know, it's really weird. But these are good guys, right? So if you see the larva, enjoy the larva. And I just realized I have a mating pair in this picture. So if you're offended, I apologize in advance. We're all adults, yeah. All right, so here are some chewers, right? So moth, butterfly, ladybug. You know, she looks a little different than the other one. And then here we go, the grub, which I think is underrespected. So here's my pitch. This is a mass chafer grub. Here in southern Arizona, the most common white grub you see, and it's the one we get calls, pictures about all the time in the plant clinic, are the mass chafer. It's not a bad guy, right? This is a detrivore, will rarely eat the roots of any plants we grow here. If you grow grass, if you have turf, they might go after those roots, and some of your neighbors are going to say, yay, quite honestly. But so here's life cycle of beetles, right? Females lay their eggs in the soil or near the soil typically. There are a few that will lay them in plants or on plants. Mostly they're close to the soil, and I'll give you where they lay them. And then the eggs hatch, and beetles spend most of their life buried, right? Whether it's in debris or in the ground, right? So summer, the adult has emerged all summer long. The female, from the minute she emerges as an adult, every time they land, the females are dropping an egg, just to let you know. But they have to do that to survive. So the eggs are where it's kind of cool. And then they have multiple instars. And so this is how they winter, right? The eggs are laid like in late summer, early fall. They overwinter buried, if you will, and then they emerge. Typically we see beetles emerging anytime from like April to June. And with this kind of a warm, dry winter, who knows what's going to happen. So grubs are the larval stage of beetles. They are not a caterpillar. They're not a worm. They are a grub. One of the grubs in particular is named a wireworm. It's very annoying. They do that. So where do they reside, right? They can be in the soil. That is like if any of you come from areas that have the invasive Japanese beetle, right? We're not going to have them, probably. Japanese beetles have to have turf or grass roots to survive, right? And they are an invasive. They have no predator control, et cetera. But here in Tucson, southern Arizona, where there's very little grass, that's we have native grasses, but we don't have turf, if you will. We're probably not going to have that problem. Leaf litter, the fig beetle that we see that's kind of ubiquitous, I'll show you a picture here in a minute. That's where the fig beetle lays her eggs, and that's where her larva will reside. It's in leaf litter. Very few do put their eggs under bark. can be on foliage, but that's rare. So this is what the fig beetle looks like. And a lot of people confuse it with the Japanese beetle. Japanese beetle is smaller and it has markings at the back end of the elytra here. These are the elytra, and it's called marmoration. So it looks really different. We have not seen any yet. There have been none identified through the cooperative extension, the university studies, and through the Department of Agriculture. So they have been in areas like Colorado and Utah where they do grow grass a little bit. So decaying stuff really is what they're looking for, right? Some of the grubs are adapted to go after worms, larvae of other insects, pest insects generally, that live in the soil, grass or lawn roots. There are some, the pine bark beetle, which has devastated the pine trees throughout the West. That is a bad boy. I'll just say that. And I think that it was introduced. I think that was an invasive with no control. And there are some beetles, typically weevils, right? So all weevils are beetles, but not all beetles are weevils. Weevils have that long snout. That's how you recognize a weevil. And they can be found in, grain silos, et cetera. So they can really devastate food sources. But the one that we see most typically is the southern mass chafer. You will see many of them. You can see a few of them. I have them. I don't worry about them. They will go after the roots of turf grass, dead or alive. They'll go after dead roots of plants. Organic material, very rarely will they go after plants. People freak out when they see them and they try to feed them to the birds or kill them or whatever. But really, they do much more good for us than they do bad. So yeah, they're about like this. Yeah. And some of them seem really chunky and beefy. Yeah. Some of them have names. You're what? Compost. That's good. You want them in there. Yeah, because it's that organic. They're helping break it up. There you go. They're breaking it down. Breaking it down. So this is what the adults look like. Don't be afraid of them. They're just fine. It's all good. They're all good. So my pitch is don't really worry about them. Piercing sucking. This is where we get into bad boy territory and where are we going? We got to go quick. So all the soft body pests that really, really annoy us in our vegetable gardens and so on. But then also stink bugs, bed bugs, mosquitoes, assassin bugs are in this. So assassin bugs, there's a really great assassin bug that we can find in the garden, and they are related to the kissing bug. And nobody wants a kissing bug. But the easiest way to not have kissing bugs is to control the pack rat population. I don't know if you know this, but kissing bugs require living alongside in the pack rat nest. That's how they survive. If you control your pack rats, you do not have kissing bugs. You don't have to have expensive sprays every month to control them. So get those prickly pear off the ground, get rid of the mitt, what they call the mitten that they grow. I call them pack rat condos. So anyway, to deal with that. So the types of damage we see from these guys, stippling, where on the top of the leaf you see basically spots of yellow, can be more widespread than this. The key here to identify what you've got, turn that leaf over, because it's not what's happening on the top with these piercers and suckers. They have adapted to come in from the bottom side, right? So there's some aphids in here, there's some carcasses, a lot of frass. And we'll talk about aphids here in a minute. Yellowing chlorosis, these are aphids. So when you see this kind of yellowing, the stippling or chlorosis like this, and it's not the watering, it's not lack of fertilizer, et cetera, and you see these insects, what they're doing is they're sucking the sugars out of that leaf and it can no longer photosynthesize properly. That's why it's yellow. Distortion, this is very similar to one of the earlier slides. This is what thrips do, right? Thrips are in this group. Deformity, these are galls. Mites can cause these galls, although they're arachnids, they're not insects. This is actually from a psyllid, Psyllid. It's not the Asian citrusillid, this is a different one. And these little galls that are developed, you can You might cringe, sorry. But you can collect these galls and take an X-Acto knife and cut them open, look under a scope or under a loop, and you can identify exactly what problem you have, right? Which is helpful in controls. Thinning and dieback, you all know what that looks like. So hemiptera. We're going to go through this. 4 suborders, none of these in northern hemisphere. But then we get to these. This is, and I'm not going to pronounce that Latin because I can't. But spittlebugs, cicadas, don't need to worry about them. Leafhoppers, they're a tough, and I'm going to give you some hints on that. Then the next group in Hemiptera, these are the piercing, sucking, true bugs, right? Are the aphids. The thing about aphids, if it looks like an aphid, if it moves like an aphid, if you have stippling or looks like the damage of an aphid, the frass on the backside, it's an aphid. It doesn't matter what color it is. And these guys are so unique and so interesting. When their colonies become too big and they've outgrown their food source, they grow wings and move and separate from their original colony and move to find new foodstuffs. They get to where they can set up a new colony and they chew off their own wings. Isn't that something? If they don't reproduce enough, and in certain seasons they might not, the females can reproduce asexually. They don't have, you know, they're I have one talk I give that's 7 fascinating facts about aphids. And it really, they are so interesting. Literally. So there you go. That's the backside of a leaf that has got an aphid problem. Yep. And I think we've all grown squash family that look like this, you know? Okay. So what do? Sharp shot of water. We take their best weapon, which is this piercing sucking mechanism. It's like sharp like a needle, strong like a needle, like a hypodermic needle. And what you do is a sharp shot of water, you break them out. We are higher on the food chain. It is okay. It is okay. So you don't need to get fancy. You don't need soap. You don't need neem oil. You want to break their mouth sharp. And I don't mean like a drizzle of water. I mean, turn it up full volume and sharpshoot it, right? Because you want to break them out. And that works for all of these, right? Aphids, whitefly, if you can get that out there early enough to deal with leafhoppers, and it works with scale, right? Cochineal scale, what do we recommend? Sharp shot of water to get rid of them. Collect them, make some dye, you know, whatever you need to do. Okay, so, so true bugs, here we go, right? There's a proboscis. So stink bugs, bed bugs, assassin bugs, leaf-footed bugs. I promise. So anybody recognize what this guy is? You should all know how to recognize this. It's a bed bug. They're in this. So you saw some of the other proboscis where they're really long, right? They're all adapted for what they need to do. Their proboscis is just this. I don't know if I did circle them. It's really short because it's going for the capillary action of your blood, right? They don't want to go very deep. They don't want bone. They don't want muscle. They want blood, right? So that's what a bed bug looks like. We should all know this, no matter where we go, no matter what hotel we check into. So to control or not to control, we're about to wrap up here. I hope I'm not running too long. Number one, monitor, monitor, monitor. Look at what's happening in your yard. Keep track of what's going on. And ask yourself, what the heck is this? And how do I identify it, right? You want to identify from the type of damage. Maybe you can see it. You know, you turn the leaf up and it's, oh, I got it, right? But sometimes you can do it just from the damage. And you can use these beautiful, I'm going to show you a picture of what I'm talking about here in a minute, yellow sticky traps. They are cheap. I think you can buy 50 of them for less than 20 bucks. And you can cut them in half because you really don't need the big, you can cut them all day long. And you can hang them among your plants. You can put them on stakes. And what will happen is the pest insects are attracted to the yellow. There are a couple like whitefly, thrips that could be attracted to a particular blue, like the blue of your jacket, but it's kind of limited. They are all attracted to the yellow. Rarely you'll get a beneficial in there, but it's very rare. The stickiness is not enough for a bird or anything like that, so don't worry about that. But many of them have grids on them, so you can figure out how many of the pests you have per square inch. You can get to by footage, etc. So you can develop your own thresholds of if you control or not. You know, if I have like, 500 in a square foot of something like a grasshopper, I'm going to try to do some control, right? I don't want that. I don't want that. So anyway, trap, monitor, ID is all very helpful. This is the threshold thing. Is it really bugging me or can I tolerate it? I live in the foothills, and when I talk to my neighbors, they have an extremely low tolerance, and it really breaks my heart, right? Because then things get out of balance, right? The good news is that I've been putting green lacewing out, and so my neighbors have started using less in the way of chemicals. I've known, I don't, it's interesting. They don't have as many problems because I'm sharing my beneficials with them. It's taken time, but what can I say? So it's about tolerance. What can I take? And if you really are dependent upon, say, your cabbage and you have cabbage worms, you're going to control for them, right? You're going to want to put out some Bacillus thuringiensis Kerstaki and not have that cabbage moth become, or cabbage worm can become a caterpillar. It is a caterpillar becoming a moth. So we all have our limits. I apparently have a very high tolerance, but my yard is in pretty good balance. Once in a while, I'll have an outbreak of something, but it's usually because of something I've done, right? It's something the gardener has done. And then we want to look at what are the safest and most effective options for control. And then you want to think about root cause, right? Do I have aphids because I'm using too much nitrogen fertilizer? Do I have aphids because I'm watering this plant too much, forcing some tight flush of growth that these soft-bodied pests like, right? Do I need to change something I'm doing? We call those cultural controls. It's what the gardener's hand does, right? So we're talking integrated pest management, which is what all the universities have moved to in terms of reducing chemical use. When you look at IPM, integrated pest management, the very last thing on any of their calendars or schedules would be going to chemical use. You do a whole laundry list of other stuff first, right? And that would include the monitoring, identifying what you've got. Is it like when you're talking to ranchers and growers in the Midwest, they know exactly how many grasshoppers per 75 square feet, no matter how much acreage they have. They go down to 75 square feet and they trap and they monitor so they know when they have to go in and deal with it or they're going to lose a crop, potentially lose a crop. So action thresholds. And for some of us, it's visual. Some of us, it's, gosh. And sometimes it's just, well, that kind of got out of hand. I'm going to put that one in the trash. So those are action thresholds. Optimal control tactic. I give one talk and it runs less than an hour called optimal applications of organic pesticides. And I just want to remind us all that when CIDE is in the word, whether it's insecticide, pesticide, herbicide, it says that thing is going to kill something, whether it's an organic thing or a heavy duty chemical thing, it's about killing something. And so our job as gardeners, I think, is identifying what we've got, making sure that when we get to the point where we feel like we need to intervene, we intervene in the smartest, most efficient, economical, and safest way. Because there are quite a few organics that there's a spillover into beneficials, or there are a couple that are a broad spectrum kill, meaning anything in contact with it will die. Pyrethrins are, I consider pyrethrins basically the scorched earth of organics. Whatever, and pyrethrins are derived from chrysanthemum oil. Pyrethroids, their close cousin, is a chemical formulation that is produced in a lab, but they do the same thing. And it's a broad spectrum. So if you happen to get it on some of your beneficial insects or where you don't want it, it will potentially kill them as well. So, and then of course, how do I correct what I've done to make this problem occur? So just briefly, thrips have an interesting life cycle. Cooperative extension, we don't recommend control of thrips. They do cosmetic damage unless you have a very unhealthy plant, and then it really did need to be taken out. But the interesting thing about thrips is you can control them above ground and you can control them below ground. Understanding the life cycle of the insect is important and knowing when you want to intervene. Thrips can be a problem for specific growers of specific crops when they're in the soil. And so they need to intervene, use something like the fungus Bovaria bassiana on them and try to eradicate them. Once they're above, they're just really a cosmetic problem. So leaf-footed bugs. I promised I would talk a little bit about leaf-footed bugs, and I think they're a really great example of where you need you need a full-on integrated pest management plan, because one thing may work, but it may not. And so you have to have another thing that might work and another. So just to point out, we know they're leaf-footed bugs because that rear leg, remember it's coming out of this thorax here, looks like a leaf, right? The lower part of the leg looks like a leaf. And look how well those eggs are adapted. They're actually in a hard shell laid end to end to end to end by the female. Really kind of a pretty egg casing. But it's almost impossible to control them in that egg case because it's like it's a little steel case. So they have adapted well for survival. So, and let me just go back here real quick. So these are the instars. This is incomplete metamorphosis. They don't pupate. Once they hatch, they really, from day one, look like what they're going to be. And they're very mobile. One of the reasons they're tough to control. You can't, if you can get them with a spray of neem oil, great. Not always going to work. Neem oil spray on top of that bad boy is not going to kill it generally, right? Once they're an adult, you could do it on the instars, but out here, not so much. So when we're talking about an integrated plan for control, exclusion, right? We know when leaf-footed bugs are going to appear. We know the kind of plants that they like to be on. Pomegranates, big favorite of them. So you can exclude them by taking your nice light frost cloth and put them over the plants that you know might be subject to them moving in and taking over your fruit crop. So that's what exclusion is. Monitor early and often. Yellow sticky traps so you can see when those instars are out, because they will be attracted to those yellow sticky traps. Keep an eye on them and decide if you want to get out there with some neem oil, maybe a little Bovaria bassiana, because they do have a kill rate on the early instars here. Big deal that we all have control over is getting rid of weeds and debris. And I don't mean getting rid of all the leaves, because we need more organic material in our soil. And we encourage you for that. But weeds and debris, meaning diseased material or stuff that has died and is highly suspect of being infested with, with some sort of an insect, you want to get rid of that stuff. Keep a pretty clean site. If you have fruit that has become infested because you haven't done any of the other stuff, don't leave it on the tree. Pull it out and trash it, because once they're in there, and they're coming back. You can hand pick these guys if you can get to them. It's a little like, what was that movie where it was Grasshopper was, going in with the, yeah. It's a little bit of a game in my household. But here's another one. Here's a nice preventive. Think about trap crops. Trap crops are used all the time by organic farmers, and they know exactly which plants to use with which plants. A trap crop is something that will attract the pest insect you want to pull away, right? So you're not killing them, you're just moving them elsewhere. And so for the leaf-footed bug, plant some sunflowers, and they'll go to that, and they will be preferential to it. And encourage any predators, birds and ladybugs, and really on this guy you want assassin bugs. So learn how to identify an assassin bug and don't kill it, because a lot of people I think do. Spray controls, not effective on this guy, right? When I say spraying Bovaria bassiana, you're spraying it on the leaves of plants so that they take it in and ingest, right? Because with organics, it's either a contact spray that's going to kill them, contact oil that is going to smother them, or something where they ingest it and take it in and it kills them from the inside. So cultural practices, again, remove debris, weeds, etc. If you don't want these things overwintering. Crop rotation, what that means is if you're planting annual flowers or vegetables, Don't plant your tomatoes in the same place 3 years, right? Year one, you're going to have a great tomato crop. Year two, you're going to have some pests. By year three, those pests will have invited all of their friends, family members, and their family members will have invited their family. So 3 years max, max. And it doesn't need to be massive where you move them to another bed entirely. Think of it in square feet. Just plant your square feet differently. And rotate really heavy feeders like tomatoes with some of those improving kinds of crops like beans or peanuts. Peanuts are great. Make sure you're watering, fertilizing the correct way. I would say in the plant clinic, 80% of the problems that we see are related to water, right? Too much water, not enough water, or too frequent with not enough depth. There's just a whole combination. You're having trouble, contact us at the plant. You're still working plant clinic, Deb, aren't you? Yeah. I love plant clinic because I learn something every time I do a shift. And then work on your soil. Compost, 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 mulch, 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 compost, compost. Physical control, those sharp shots of water, hand picking, using row covers like I mentioned to exclude insects that you know are coming in. This is really handy. Row covers are really handy on squash, on melons, that sort of thing, because you know there are going to be moths coming in to lay eggs, and you're going to have caterpillars and so on. Sticky traps, biological controls. This is encouraging those predators, those beneficial insects, birds, that lovely garden spider I showed you. Biorational controls, that's what that entire talk I give is on pretty much on biorational controls. These are things like the bacillus that we use to control mosquito. Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis, simple as that to quite complex. Avoid chemicals. Not, even the general organics, make sure you read the label, read the literature, and don't think because it's labeled organic that it's particularly safe for everything. Because when it's meant to kill, it can kill a broad array. There are some organics that actually take out amphibians and frogs and toads and that sort of thing. So be cautious about that. Chemical controls always start low on the incursion, and that's insecticidal soap. Probably number 2 is neem oil, pyrethrin. You get into that territory, be really cautious. And your best tools for monitoring, that's a yellow sticky trap. You can hang them, you can put them on stakes, etc. Have a loop. I love this one because it has multiple magnifications. And honestly, if you can't afford anything fancy, I mean, these are less than $30 typically. You want to get it like a 30x if you only get a single lens. I also like them where they have the LED on one side as well as a black light because you never know when you need a black lights you can use to find night insects more easily. And then this is landscape pest identification cards that University of California puts out. I think I brought mine and I'll show them to you. That's the QR code for getting to them. Directly to their site. I think they cost $25, no shipping, I don't think. But the beauty of this is that the way they've separated, so it's a fold-out deck. Mine have been out in the garden with me for well over a decade. They look a little worn, but they're still fine, right? And they fit in my pockets. But the front side, they're organized by type of insect. The front of the card shows you each of the life stages of that insect, so you can help with identification. They talk a little bit about sort of special characteristics of the insect. They show a picture of the damage, at least one picture, many are multiples. The brilliant thing is if you turn that card around, because it's one insect per card, you turn that around, it gives you the integrated pest management steps to use in terms of control, from the lowest incursion to the scorched earth kind of version of it. So definitely well worth it. I use mine all the time. There's just no way to know everything about this plant, this or and that is it. Oh, sure. Is it working? Good, good. All right. Yeah, I found a new easy way to do QR codes a few months ago, and so I can't QR code enough. Anyway, so I hope you've come away with sort of one thing, and that's just curiosity and respect for these insects and what they do for us, and how we can be with them and interact. Not kill them all. So With that, I want to thank you for inviting me and went a little long. I apologize, but actually we're okay, aren't we? Good. Perfect. Well, I'm not perfect. Talk to my husband about that. We have discussions about that all the time. Anyway, if you have any questions, I call this Stump the Stoop. So, and we have Deb Green here, who's also a longtime master gardener.
We have a
We should
question.
answer, right?
Here's a question.
Question about agave snout weevils.
Yes.
So controlling them, or like as soon as I see, the leaf on an agave go down, should I just pull the whole plant out and
Yeah.
get rid of it? And
That's really the only thing. So it takes it's the grub that causes the problem, right? And again, it's a weevil. So it has that really long snout. That's a beautiful black insect, but pretty destructive. They have specific agave that they like. Typically the Americana is the one we see. So there are a lot of other agave they don't care about. So I would look at replacing with those. But here's the deal. By the time your agave die, they've been in the soil working on it for 3 years. And according to the research at the university, even really harsh chemicals like imidacloprid, which is ground beef or bee die-off, that won't even kill them. So the thing is, you pull them up, you can't really get rid of them. So plant with something that they don't like is really, but yeah, leaving that plant there, it's dead, is not really. But the good news about Americana, they grow like a little weed.
no,
Which variety? What's that?
I had a couple different.
Oh, because like the
really not
Victoria
just agaves,
Ridge, the Queen Victoria, they don't really
they
like.
don't.
No, and the King or Prince Ferdinand, they don't like. There are quite a few that they do not like. The blue, yeah, yeah. And it seems to me it is sort of more toward the gray blue tone that they go for. And I don't know if there's something about the sugaring in that they really love. I don't know. Yeah, they're pretty annoying. That's one of those. But it's not much. Well, the only one I know people use is the imidacloprid, and according to university research, it has little to no effect on the larva or the beetle. Yeah, and you don't want to use imidacloprid because it's a systemic, right? So it moves all the way through the plant. So if you have any kind of flowering plant, it's going to be in the pollen, right? So that's a thing to think about when these things are systemic. It goes all the way through every cell. What was that?
The old school.
Yeah. But we're Tucson organic gardeners. We don't do that.
Yeah, we don't do that.
Yep. Nope.
Like the ground that they come up from? Like, so if I have like blue agave, will be better than the ground, but like.
Beetles are above ground. Remember the beetles, like the adult beetle is flying around, and every time they land, boom, there's an egg. And she takes her snout, the proboscis, and pushes them down into the soil to help protect them. I know. They, outwit, outsmart, outlast. Yeah, no. Did you have a question, Barbara? All right. Good. You can all go home early.